Hi there, my name is Bruce and welcome to Startup Diskie's Full Tech Chat episode 10. And today we'll be talking about software updates. Software updates usually promise something good like a new feature, a bug fix, or a security enhancement, but sometimes all they deliver is misery. As usual, I'm joined by Jay. Hello.
Howdy.
And I'm joined by Dana. Hello.
Hi.
But before we get started, I just wanted to apologise for the long delay since our last episode. Jay and Dana have been laying low for these last few months, but we're pretty sure that the heat from the cartel is finally off and we can get back into regular episodes. Now, Jay, as you are the main architect of today's topic, my first question is directed to you. Software upgrade, software update, firmware update, security update, software patch, are these all different or are they basically the same thing?
Well, it depends on who you ask, really. If you ask me, they're all different. But that's me. I would break it down as a software update being like, in our case, updating from one macOS version to the next point update. So from 10.4.10 to 10.4.11. Usually it's bug fixes.
Going back away there.
Huh?
Going back away there.
I don't remember any of the newer OSs and how far they go.
Jay just defaults to Tiger whenever possible.
Tiger.
Pretty much, yeah. Bug fixes, small enhancements, enhancement thingies, sometimes small features. Although in more recent years, some OSs updates can come with a lot of features. An upgrade, you go from, let's go back from Tiger to Leopard, comes with a lot of new features, UI changes in some cases. And then there's a patch, which is typically to address a pretty significant vulnerability or flaw in the software. And I call a security update a patch as well. So I do merge those together. But so updates, routine improvements, upgrades, major changes, and patches, quick fixes for security or stability. But there's one more.
Oh, there's one more. Goodness me.
Yeah. Firmware upgrade is totally different. And I'm not sure how to describe this because I haven't really given it any thought until 5 seconds ago. Firmware upgrades deals with low-level system control rather than just the operating system or applications that run on it. It's kind of like the embedded system software that controls the hardware. So those are typically read-only. You can apply them once. It's very hard to downgrade from them. So I would put those in their own separate category.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll probably spend a bit of time covering firmware updates a little later because I think a lot of the time there are times when people just don't realize how many things out there can potentially be firmware updated. But when we're talking about a security update, is it really a security update or is it just the companies telling us they don't want to own up to the fact that it's a bug fix? They don't want to own up to the fact that their software had a bug in it. So they just call it a security update so that it makes us feel like we're all being kept safe.
Well, I guess I can only speak to Apple in that regard because I don't follow any of the other companies when they do that. I know that when Apple pushes out a security update, it comes with a whole web page full of listed vulnerability fixes. So
I would assume pretty much everybody does it to some degree or another. I mean, think of all the bugs that Microsoft probably comes across on any given update.
Oh, I mean, I use Teams on the Mac, and if that isn't the most bug-ridden piece of shit in the world, it's. I imagine it runs smoothly on Windows, but it doesn't. It's getting updated regularly, and it'll be working, and then the next time you do an update, it won't be working, and then you do an update, and it will be working, or something won't work. Some part of it won't work.
Is Teams?
I only use Teams on my work laptop, and it's managed from the company. So when it pushes an update, it breaks something. So I roll back my Time Machine back up, and get the previous version back, an hour later, it auto updates again, forced. So I'm dealing with this
Is
stuff all
Teams
day.
like the spiritual successor to Skype?
Yes, it is. So essentially what happened is, for those that aren't aware of this, Microsoft ended up buying the company's Skype. Hasn't Skype just gone from strength to strength? And then they used all of that technology to then do Teams. And of course, Teams has now become, during the COVID era, everyone was talking about Zoom. Zoom just became the thing. Oh, well, let's do a Zoom. It was all Zoom. And for a while there, that was the case. But now, and again, because of so many people are locked into the Microsoft 360 sort of system, they're all Teams. So pretty much any time I'm having a meeting now, a business type meeting, it's going to be with Teams. So I have to deal with that crap all the time, unfortunately.
I've never heard anyone speaking favorably about Teams, but anyway.
No. And of course, Teams has another layer, and that is the little chat messagey type thing that happens, which of course is something which just, I think, destroys people's sort of concentration. But anyhow, I digress. We're talking about updates. The one of the I guess important things about an update is they kind of exist in two ways, and you mentioned this there, Jay. You said that you've got forced updates, and sometimes people in a corporate situation, they do have forced updates. They've got a system that they can't control. In other instances, you have the option to decide whether you want an update or not, and you can actually look at this update and say, no, I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to do that at a more convenient time. I guess there's a question: should we be dropping everything and updating the second that comes out? Or should we be waiting? Is it okay to skip some of these updates? And I guess I'm talking probably more from a system perspective here rather than software. We'll talk about software a little bit later on, but in an operating system, if there's a security update, should we just be dropping everything and installing it?
I would say with security updates and that sort of thing, yeah, obviously do those right away, because it's, no matter what else is in there in the update with it, it is security. It is protecting you from outside threats or hacking or bugs or backdoors or whatever you want to call it.
Vulnerabilities, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so security updates, we're thinking, yes, do it straight away.
I always do.
Yeah.
And we're assuming here a normal, everyday, off-the-shelf macro PC that normal people have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's the question. Do either of you've both just said that you want to do these security updates straight away. Do either of you have automatic updates switched on?
No.
No, but I run every system I have with OpenCore to run unsupported operating systems. So I always wait to see what the developers and the community says about the latest update. I mean, other people are more eager to install it, so I wait a few days. On the work computer, yeah, I install it right away, preferably during work hours so that I can't receive messages for an hour. But on all the other computers, no, I wait.
Okay, yeah.
I do try to install them at some point, but I give it a few days to see how other people experience it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole wait and see thing is a very common attitude with a lot of people. It's like an update comes out and they go, I'm going to check and see what happens first. And I guess the question there is, so what's the worst that can happen? What are some of the bad things from doing an update?
Well, we've all learned our lessons, haven't we? Because we got burned by that in the past at some point or another.
Yeah.
Somebody releases, especially when updates became automatic, or you could download them. They became automatic in that sense, instead of waiting, every 6 months to buy a upgrade CD and upgrade all of your stuff. That stuff was properly tested for the most part, but then these updates get released real quick. And they're like, oh, here, install this. That'll fix this and that. And then it breaks something else because it hasn't been properly tested. So
yeah, I used to be a lot more gung-ho about installing updates because, I was curious about it. I write about it in most cases, but now they've made it so difficult to even just do a clone of your boot drive these days. And you can't start up from it, or you have to go through all this hassle if it was still easy to just, okay, I install an update, it went completely wrong, plug in a USB drive, boot up from that, and I'll fix it later. That's not a thing anymore, apparently. So now I'm like, no, I'm waiting, because if it borks my system, that's a 8-hour reinstall, restore, and I'm not dealing with that.
Have you ever been really burned?
Just time-wise, I've never lost any data, but definitely, and I've never bricked a machine to the point of unrecoverable. But yeah, I've lost a few days trying to get everything back in order.
I don't think so. When the when the El Kappa 10 update came out that would brick the old Mac Pros, I'm trying to remember if I did that or not. No, I don't think I did. I think I found out about it before I tried it, which was odd, because it was like, why would this even work if it's just going to brick the machine? Why would it just say you can't do that on this machine? But
yeah, that is odd. But I mean, it's a very interesting point you make there with the idea of sort of bricking machine. I guess we probably see this more with phones and tablets and that these days, where a new an iOS or something has come out and been installed on, sort of on a phone, and then all of a sudden the phone doesn't work anymore.
Well, I always break out in a sweat when there's a major iOS update, because I'm just like, I'm going to wait until the like .2 or .3 update to that, because
I mean, the thing I always find funny about those bricking occurrences is they don't happen to everyone. They only happen to some people. And I just always wonder what it is. What was the variable? What was the variable that ended up with this bricking? Is it the way they did the update? Is it some software they had installed? Is it a particular configuration they had? But you end up with, half the people all just going down and going, yeah, update worked fine. And then you end up with, this little pocket of people saying, I can't use my phone at all.
And I've always defended this, but I've now changed my mind. In defense of that, I used to say, well, it's impossible to test every phone with every app and every combination of, but now I'm like, they have full control of the whole ecosystem. Sure, you can jailbreak and all that, but that's not really a thing anymore, I think. Apple knows the OS and the applications that are living on that device. They should be able to test, because every app has to meet the standards of whatever they have today, else you get booted out the App Store. So I'm not really defending Apple in that regard anymore. Like, yeah, they should know better.
It's a very interesting thing, because when you look at, say, a company like Microsoft are making their money by selling software. They're selling the operating system. It is in their best interest when they release software for it to work on as many machines as possible, supporting hardware as far back as is practical to do, because they're really obliged to do it. They want their software on as many machines as possible, because that's what you're paying for. Apple, of course, is this very, very different way of making money, where they are giving you the software for free, but you can only run it on their hardware. And so, whereas Microsoft will be saying, okay, here's a new update, and it works on computers as far back as 286s or something. That's a bit of an exaggeration, of course. Apple can just, at any time they want, they can just turn around and say, okay, here's a new system update, and we no longer support computers from this age and back.
Yeah. Hey, you have an iPhone 15 that's like from 2023. Well, it doesn't do Apple AI, so sorry.
Yeah.
Apple Intelligence.
And there actually comes the whole planned obsolescence side of things, that when an update comes out and brings out this new feature, and sorry, you can't have that new feature with your old phone, and all of a sudden your phone stops looking as glossy as it did before, and you start wanting the newest and best, and then you want to go out and get a new phone. And that is something that Apple do incredibly well, and is one of the things that keeps people buying these things, even when the old hardware might still be in very good condition. I remember there was a feature that I used to use on my iPhone. We're going back a way here. We're talking about an iPhone 7, so we're going a fair way back here. There's a feature on the phones. It's something that's not actually switched on, but I can tell you most old people have it switched on, and that is a little magnifying glass. So you can go to the control panel, press a little magnifying glass, and you can use the camera as like a magnifying glass. You can zoom in on stuff. So if you're trying to read, how many pills am I supposed to take tonight? You can zoom in on the label and see the writing. And you can also take a photo with that. And when you do take a photo with the magnifying glass tool, it does some sort of fancy image processing and allows you to get incredibly sharp, detailed images when you zoom in. And in one of the updates that I did with the iPhone 7, I don't remember which one it was, but from one of the significant iOS updates that I did, they removed the image processing. So all of a sudden, when I was taking an image from the magnifier, it was just like taking a normal photo, just an average everyday photo. It didn't do any of that image processing to improve the sharpness of that image. And this was a feature that I used a lot because I was using it for taking photos of serial numbers on computers and that sort of stuff, or I was using it to take photos of the letters on a chip or something like that, the codes on a chip. And so all of a sudden, I've done a system update and my phone has lost a really important feature to me. And that is, of course, an incredibly frustrating thing to happen, that, you think you're actually, taking this step forward, and I ended up taking a monumental step backwards in the process. But that's as we said right in the outset, sometimes the updates bring us joy and sometimes they bring us misery.
Yeah, and it's you still have a choice. I think you have typically about 2 weeks to downgrade from the update you just did, assuming you have a backup and all that. But then you're missing out on the other new features that were part of that update. My wife had one where her wallpaper on the lock screen is a live image, and every time you unlock the phone, it moves. I think it was around iOS 15, 16. They took it out, didn't work anymore, and they didn't bring it back until recently. But that was a major pain point for her, to the point where she was seriously considering downgrading just to have that live photo back. So everybody has their unique, this is the best feature ever. So that's very true. And of course, this is what they have to do in order to make us want to update. They have to keep adding new features. And of course, from their perspective, I see that as a very difficult thing and this isn't just in operating systems, this is in software as well. When you think about any software that you use, any sort of operating system you use, they want you to use the latest and greatest, but they need to provide some sort of motivation for you to do it. And they need to give you some sort of new feature. And, and obviously what we've seen with Apple recently is that, like the AI, they're very heavily on the AI side of things, that this is a new feature that's in there. I have to say, from my perspective, every now and again along the journey, I find a feature that jumps out and I really, really like. But oftentimes it's not even necessarily the big one that they were talking about. For me, one of the most wonderful things that you can do now with, particularly with the computer, is I can jump onto my Photos app and I can search for a word, and it will search for words that appear in images. So, for instance, if I've gone on holiday and I went to a particular place and I took a photo of the sign, and I can just do a search for that, and it will actually bring up the image with the words on the sign. And for me, that was a huge feature and has been incredibly beneficial to have, being able to treat a bitmap image like it is a page of text. I think is something that's in the phones and on the desktop. And that to me is one that I think has actually been a huge step forward. Yeah. Do you need the M series for that, or does Intel do that as well? Because I know I can turn a picture into selectable text in preview on my Intel, but
it probably does work. I have not tested it, to be honest. I haven't checked between the two. I've got my sort of two main computers. So I've got three main computers really, and two of them are M and the other one's Intel. So I'll have to go and check on the Intel. I guess the other thing I want to talk about is software updates. Now, the main thing that pops into my head when I think of software updates is Adobe, because that's probably the software that I update the most. And Adobe works with a subscription-based model, and so you're paying them every single month, and then they're providing you with a whole bunch of regular updates. And my guess is those regular updates are designed to make you feel better about having to fork out that money each month. Because the alternative would be with a one-off purchase, that once you've paid for that software, the only way that software company is going to get any more money out of you is if they provide a big whiz-bang update that you're then going, oh, I want that new feature, I'm there going to pay for it. Yeah. But of course, companies are moving further and further away from that, because what they have discovered is that a lot of people, like me, I'm happy to just sit on the version that I have. I am not never really desperately looking to get a new update to the software.
Yeah, I was just thinking I would still be using CS6 today if it was still compatible.
Well, especially in the case of Adobe. You're so happy to finally have this 22.8.059 B5 version that actually works and does everything you want it to do. You're not going to update. Hell no.
Yeah. No, it's like I was thinking of this the other day. I was like, if I was able to, I would still be using CS6 today, because the only thing that's come across, that's come down from Adobe in the last however many years that's been, that I would consider upgrading for, is the AI image generation, which is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think content-aware scaling and content-aware cropping and stuff, that was a big thing. That was something that they actually purchased from someone else. That wasn't even their technology. Someone else developed that, and they bought the company. And that was a big thing, certainly coming from my perspective of, when I used to work in sort of pre-press and design and print and that sort of stuff. When you would get an image that just simply was not the right size for the space it was going into, and I'm not someone who distorts images, even though I see a lot of people have no issue with that at all, but I will never distort an image. And the idea of being able to get a little bit of extra width out of the image with it actually, sort of just fudging it and kind of...
There's a point you can distort it before you're like, okay, no.
Yeah, no, that's right. Then it's only a couple of percent,
Yeah, maybe 5 at the most, depending on the image content. But
yeah, so I think I felt like so there are a few things like non-destructive changes were important with Adobe Photoshop, things like content-aware scaling, that sort of stuff. My biggest frustration is, one of the pieces of software I use a lot is Adobe Illustrator. And this is not as common as Photoshop, because it's a vector-based editing tool, which is really important for a lot of the stuff that I do. But one of the things that drives me absolutely bonkers about that is I now have one of the fastest computers I ever have ever owned, and Adobe Illustrator seems to run slower than I have ever seen it run anywhere. Now, they are supposedly releasing stuff that is designed to work on the Apple Silicon, but it is just a slug. It is better now than it was in some of the sort of earlier releases. It's a little bit more predictable and practical now, but I would find myself wishing for CS4 running on an old G5 when I'd be using Adobe Illustrator. And of course, that's a very frustrating thing. And again, this is something where a software updates have been forced upon us, because when you make a shift. So Apple did this with when they shifted from Mojave to Catalina. They dropped support for 32-bit applications. So all of a sudden you can be sitting there with this application that you use every day, and it's not supported anymore. And that forces you into buying a software update, because you need to get the 64-bit version. And the same thing has happened with Apple Silicon. They've released these applications that don't work on Apple Silicon. It's like, here's our new one. It does work on Apple Silicon. It'll be faster. It'll be better. Come and buy it. And so you're then sort of forced into buying that newer piece of software.
That's kind of like what they did back in the 90s with the when they went from the 68040s and 030s to the PowerPC chips. You had accelerated for Power Macintosh applications.
Yeah, I even recall, and I think Adobe was one of them. when we kind of switched over to the G4 dual processor systems, for the software to be compatible and make use of 2 CPUs, you need an update. I think Adobe was one of them, but a lot of apps I used well into the G4 era that was unable to use multiple processors because I just refused to update.
Yeah. I mean, it really wasn't until we got into OS 10 where the Macs got much better at actually utilizing multi-processors. But I do remember in the early days and back being in OS 9, having, sort of specific things that would work with a dual processor. So it might be some of the filters in Photoshop. So maybe just a lot of your normal stuff in Photoshop made no difference, but you might be using specific filters and they would utilize multiple processors, and you can obviously speed things up there. 3D graphics, of course, is something that's always
I think I recall a demo between I think a regular Sawtooth and then a dual CPU. I think it was a little video or something where they demoed the difference between those with a radial blur, and it was like, you just freed up my whole week. That's how much time it saved.
That's right.
And radial blur was all the thing back then. So,
well, I've mentioned this before, I think probably in some of my live streams, and that when I used to get a new computer or a faster computer, or I was sitting in front of a faster computer, what I always did was test unsharp mask and Gaussian blur. They were the 2 things that I used to always test and see how fast they would go. And I remember the very first time I got to try out a 68040 computer, and it was at a demo somewhere. I can't even remember what. It was another company, and I remember they had an image there, and I just tested out an unsharp mask. It was like, oh, wow. It's like, this is going to change my life. Software updates. I mean, I guess we're probably all in the same mindset that once we find the tools, the features that we want, the stability that we want, we'd all be actually quite happy to just stay there and not be forced into having to make a change.
I will say though, opposed to OS updates and upgrades, software updates are a lot easier to roll back, assuming that everybody has at least Time Machine, or if you're on PC, whatever PCs use, it's easy to just grab an old application, maybe just support files and preference files, and you're up and running. But for an whole OS, definitely more hesitant than software.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I think one of the other things, and we'll probably come back to software a little bit later, but I think one of the other things that we could talk about here is the fact that there are a lot of things that have software updates that you wouldn't even necessarily think of. In this day and age where we've got all sorts of smart equipment, washers, dryers, dishwashers, I mean, I actually had a situation with my dishwasher recently that had a little icon that was sticking up in the corner. I'm like, well, what is this icon? I don't even know what it is. And then I had to launch the app. Yes, I had to launch the dishwasher app. And it told me that there was a software update. Now, this would have been really a firmware update. And I had to do a little update to my dishwasher. Don't tell me what it was doing, what the change was. I have no idea what the update did or whatever, but I did it, and now the little icon is gone from the screen. So, but with all of these devices out there that, sort of have updates, and some of them I think it's probably a good thing to keep up to date. Some of them maybe not so much. But in particular, if all these devices are being connected to the internet, and so then theoretically connected to the outside world, there's going to be vulnerabilities in these. I mean, it's like if we talk about security cameras where you hear instances of people, getting into someone else's network and then looking at the view from someone else's security camera. So I definitely feel like with some of this sort of, as I say, smart hardware that we have, they're all now, rather than just plugged into the wall, it's now connected to the internet either by Ethernet or by Wi-Fi, that, it's probably not a bad idea to keep these things updated with the latest software to avoid vulnerabilities. Would you agree?
Agreed. Yeah, I had yesterday, actually, one of the lights in my living room started blinking. So, and I feel just as stupid saying this as you just did with the dishwasher. I open up the app for my light bulb, and there was a firmware update available for a light bulb. Now, what I imagine trying to explain this to someone 50 years ago, like, anyway, I will say this: for any kind of software update, and this is a little off topic, or back to the software and firmware and all that stuff combined, always read the release notes. Every update comes with release notes, because there have been updates that after you install it, suddenly you're tied into a monthly subscription and it won't work unless you sign up, or stuff like that. So always read what the manufacturer tells you the fixes are, or the bug fixes are, or security patches.
Yeah. Oh, case in point with that, when I bought my car, it's a 2015, and so there was an app where you can lock and unlock and start the car and roll the windows up or down, do all these things. Whole list of stuff you could do from the app on your phone. And when I bought it, they're like, yeah, sure, that's on there. And so when I went and downloaded the app, they had just updated the app to the newest version, and it made all vehicles older than like 2018 obsolete. So I can see a picture of my car, and that's it. Can't do anything. Now I went back and I told them, I was like, how do I downgrade this? And they're like, oh, well, did you get it from the App Store? Yeah. Well, you can't. Oh, great. Thanks.
Useful.
I just then, while you're talking there, Dana, I got an email just the other day from my NAS telling me that there was an update to the system. And so I just grabbed the email then and clicked on the link. And sure enough, I've just gone to a page here with all the release notes. And it's sort of what's new, added support for verifying LDAP service certificates when joining a directory. Important stuff like that. But it's also got a whole bunch of fixed issues here. So system might display incorrect status, packages failed to display after installation, security vulnerabilities. That's always a good thing to fix. So,
don't install it right now, or you'll instantly leave the chat.
I'm not going to touch it. No, indeed. But yeah. So that's that's another thing. With things like sort of NAS. A lot of NAS these days have an operating system running on them, and so therefore you might have to go in and update that from time to time. I tell you something. A couple of things that I have that allow you to do firmware updates that are kind of bizarre, really. I have got a soldering iron that allows you to do firmware updates. I have got a pair of multimeter tweezers that allow you to do firmware updates, so software updates. So that's I sort of feel like some of the things that you can update these days are kind of like, what on earth would you need to update on these things? But
well, those are a few good examples that absolutely no one is going to think about when you say update the firmware on your tweezers. Really? Dana had the car, you had the dishwasher, I had a light bulb. Well, what are some other examples of stuff that people probably never think about that might need a firmware update?
Your fridge.
Yeah. Thankfully, my fridge is not one of those sorts of fridges. But
I mean, it's my choice that I don't have a fridge where I can order movie tickets while I'm looking for my milk.
I paid extra to buy one of the last dumb TVs at Best Buy because I didn't want one.
Yeah,
smart one.
Ironically, I would actually like to have a smart washing machine, and I'll tell you why. And is that our laundry is sort of outside; it's in a separate shed outside. And so when the washing is finished, it would be nice to have a notification. My dishwasher notifies me, but it's just there. I don't need a notification. I can just, when I'm in the living room, I can just turn around.
Yeah, you can leave it and they'll dry on their own, but the clothes will get mildew if you don't take them out.
You guys might remember a year or two ago, I got a new washer, and it is a smart washer. And the first time, I think I was actually talking to you guys when my washer, your laundry is done. And I started cracking up like, that is so stupid. And now when there's a load in the thing, I'm outside, I'm in the garage. So, is the laundry done yet? Is the laundry done yet? It is handy to have.
Yeah, that would definitely be handy for us with the location of the washing machine. But of course, some of the things that people also have in their homes are things like those, what are those home hub things? Those things where you go and say, "Hey, Alexa," or whatever. The talking things that people sit on the desk to control their house and stuff like that. I'm not sure. What do you call those things?
I call them hubs.
Hubs,
home
smart hubs.
I have two of them. I have no idea what they're called.
I have one in a box unopened because I refuse to plug it in. But I got given it for free, and it is still sitting in the box, absolutely untouched.
Man.
Okay, no
See?
worries.
Hub. Just calls them hub.
Closest thing to that I use is Siri.
Siri.
Can't say it too loud, can you?
Yeah. Hey Siri. Sorry, everyone.
Everybody listening is like, damn it, turn the phone off.
Well, there's also some, a washer, a dryer, dishwasher. Those are not on 24/7, but there are some devices that, like routers, switches, modems that are always online, always connected to the internet, and that probably, if you've never checked, have several firmware updates available. And those things are constantly being... the internet, if you install a firewall and you log every single connection attempt that's made to your house on a daily basis, the amount of scans is endless. The internet is always being scanned by bots, people that are trying to get in or find vulnerabilities. And at some point, they're going to find your modem or router or switch with an 8-year-old operating system. It's like, hey, I can get in there. So definitely worth checking. Security cameras too, by the way.
Yeah, well, that was another thing I was going to mention, security cameras, and I did touch on that before. And of course, to me, security cameras kind of fall into two different areas. There's one where it's like, you set it up yourself, so you buy the cameras and you buy the recording hardware, or you use a computer and some software. The other sort are the kind of plug and play solutions that are available. Companies like Ring and stuff have that, where you can you create an account on sort of with Ring. You grab whatever it is that starts with a doorbell, but of course they have a whole bunch of cameras as well, and you can just get those cameras, add them to your account, and away you go. And it kind of looks after the whole thing for you. They're very limited in the functionality they provide because a lot of them aren't always on. They'll only trigger when there's movement in front of them, and that sort of stuff. But again, they're things where it's really important to maintain the latest version, because when you have a company like Ring, and there are other ones that do it, not just Ring, people know that there are lots and lots of people that use these because they're very, very easy to set up. And so that means that there is, potentially more resources being put into finding vulnerabilities, cracking them, because when you do find a vulnerability, you've now found a vulnerability in thousands of homes rather than just one. And I did actually hear a news article of apparently some staff at Ring were actually watching people's cameras. I mean, I think they shut that down pretty fast, but apparently there was a story of staff at Ring that weren't meant to be, but were looking at the feed from customers' cameras. Now, I should check that because I don't want to get sued, but that's apparently what I heard. So.
Yeah, and it's a common thing that I still hear today when this comes up in a conversation. It's like, oh well, no one's going to put serious time and effort into trying to hack my doorbell camera because I'm just one person or whatever. But the way it works these days, it's all automated. Someone sets up a scanner for specific ports and services and connection types and just lets it loose on the internet. They're not targeting your address specifically. You're just being swept up in a very broad scan. as one of the victims. And that is important to keep in mind. Yeah, no one might be specifically after you, but you're still going to get swept up in it and exploited if you don't keep your stuff up to date.
Absolutely. Now, I think probably what I would like to do now is have a little discussion about some of the more kind of, I guess, catastrophic updates that might have happened in the past. Some of the massive failures in terms of updates. I guess one of the most important ones that we could talk about is the CrowdStrike event that happened in, I think it was July 2024. And so this was an update that happened, and obviously in a lot of sort of corporate environments, these sorts of updates just happen automatically. They just get rolled out to all of the computers on the network. And there was a problem with CrowdStrike security software. There was a problem they put in there, and it caused all of these computers to start up with a blue screen of death. Now, I first became aware of this because my wife uses a PC and she works from home, and she got up in the morning, went to go start up, and she's just getting this blue screen. So she contacted IT, and at this stage wasn't really known about. Spoke to an IT person relatively quickly. They gave her a whole bunch of useless things to try because they had no idea what was going on. Got nowhere. Partway through the call, again. Yes, that's right. Partway through the call, she got cut off with IT. Okay, so just the call just stopped. So she went to call IT back. Next time she got called them back, she was like, "You are number 46 in the queue," and it was like, and that was at the point where I started to think, I think we might be dealing with something larger than just your laptop here. And then eventually news stories started happening, and I remember this classic image seen sort of from Sydney airport of just looking over the check-in area, and all of the screens that normally contain information about when the flights are happening and all that sort of stuff were just all blue screen, just rows and rows and rows and rows of blue screen of death throughout the airport, which of course meant that people weren't able to book onto flights and all that sort of stuff. And the impact of that was absolutely massive, and it took such a long time for a fix to be kind of released of how people could actually then get there, because you couldn't even get your computer started up to do an update. You couldn't even get that far. And that one was just an absolutely phenomenal one that just had such a wide-reaching impact. Again, us smug ones in the Mac world, we weren't being impacted at all. But Jay, you were telling me the other day that the CrowdStrike impacted your work.
Yep. They sent out a company-wide email that something was going on, and of course, being smug like I am, I giggled like, hey, idiots, I'm on a Mac, none of you are. And then all the support cases and all the stuff that was still in the queue came my way because I was the only one online because I had a Mac. Luckily, it died down quick because all of our clients are using PC as well, and they couldn't work. But
Okay.
Yep.
There's a nice
look at
picture.
that.
Look at
all the ones in the background are blue too.
Yeah, that is actually, that's Australia. I can see it says Virgin Australia there in the background.
Okay.
That's Sydney Airport. This is the image, and I think one of the reasons why some of this stuff did get featured in Australia was because of the time that it happened. I think it had a very significant impact on on the stuff just because of the time zone we're in and when it actually occurred. Yeah, I mean that was wild. Just seeing so many blue screens. I've never seen so many blue screens in my life.
Sometimes,
and it's even apart from work, we could be smug all we want, like we're on Mac, whatever. But you couldn't get a hold of the dentist, the doctor, the vet. You couldn't call. Everybody was down. From phone systems to everything is run by a computer at some point, and it was just. It's like a national holiday. Everything was down. Just go fire up the barbecue.
I vaguely remember people not being able to use checkouts at shopping centres. So, like they were going in to do groceries, couldn't use the checkouts. On that day, I had to pick up my mum from the hospital after just some minor surgery that she had, and the hospital's computer system was Windows, so none of that worked. So when I started to suspect that this was the case because I actually went onto their website and their website didn't work. The hospital's website didn't work. And so when I went in there, thankfully my mother had her own mobile phone because they were just completely down in there. They couldn't even tell me who was in the hospital. I went up to the front desk and say, I'm here to pick up so-and-so. They couldn't look up the person's name, find out where they were. And so when it came to me picking her up, I literally had to speak to her on her own mobile phone. And then she got someone to bring her down in a wheelchair. So that was a really bizarre day. It just felt so weird, and of course, a very clear indication of just how reliant so many things are on Windows.
Yeah. Cool TV show, by the way, 0 Day. It's kind of about that. But yeah, I went to go get gas, couldn't use a card. I had to use cash for that. Went to go get a coffee with the wife. Sorry, no card, cash only. So I'm like, okay, I do need groceries, so go to the grocery store. I got cash on me. No, they couldn't ring up anything.
No,
no cash, no card, no gold coins, nothing. They had to close. So it's kind of like all those years ago when the whole world moved on from Windows XP, and then 10 years later you see a billboard with Windows XP crash on it. Like, come on, people.
Well, one thing that a lot of people probably are aware of, but some people may not be aware of, is that these days most point-of-sale systems are just a computer. In the olden days, you used to buy a cash register. It was an all-in-one piece of hardware that had the till at the bottom and all that. These days, you buy the till at the bottom, and it's usually like a USB controlled type thing that you plug into the back of the computer. Your barcode scanner is a USB device you plug into the back of your computer, and then you just run point of sale software on it. I know because I have quite a bit of dealings with point of sale, and I mean, they can remote into the point of sale and control it and stuff. So they're just computers, and they're and they're PCs, and they're running on, in most cases, they're running Windows. Then with just the point of sale is an application that runs on it. So if you can't get that computer to boot up, then you can't do anything. You can't even open the cash drawer, that was definitely a catastrophic failure.
Sorry, it wasn't catastrophic, but it got in the news, and it's fairly recent, so I'm hoping that you might remember some of the details. I think it was this year or very late last year. One of the 3D printer brands got an update that ruffled a lot of feathers. What was that about?
Yes. So you're talking about the Bamboo Labs. So
Yes.
Bamboo is a company that make these quite amazing 3D printers, in that they always design them to just be plug and play. So in other words, in the very early days of 3D printing, you had to know all sorts of stuff. You had to know about E-steps and, other crap. So you had to do all sorts of calibrations and all this sort of stuff. And Bamboo Labs brought out this hardware, very expensive, I might add. This stuff isn't cheap. This new hardware, incredibly fast, but most importantly, it just works. So you literally just plug it into the wall, you fire it up, you start sending your STL files to it, and it prints them, and they come out quickly and they come out beautifully. And that's really one of the big selling points of the Bamboo Labs printers. Now, when they initially, sort of brought them out, you had an option. You could either sort of print directly to the printer, or you could print via kind of a cloud-based service. And one of the updates they made recently, they took away that ability to then just communicate to it directly. You could only communicate to the printer using their intermediate sort of software, their cloud intermediate software. And it ruffled a lot of feathers. I mean, there are a lot of people ultimately saying, you are closing this down to a point where, sort of the end user has no control, and that, sort of we've become reliant on this software of yours, that sort of thing. And other companies have done a similar sort of thing, but they've usually kept that direct connection open. You can still do a direct connect. Bamboo Labs responded to this because there were a lot of upset people about it. And their response wasn't the best. I mean, they ultimately acknowledged the anger of everyone, all of the customers being upset about this. I think they resolved some issues, but ultimately they stuck to their guns when they sort of said, this is the way we're going to move. This is the way things are going to be. So a lot of people that own those printers, they just simply didn't do the update. They just did not do that update at all. And that's fine. You can do that. Your printer's going to keep working. You can keep doing what you want without doing that update. But that's for the people that have already got them. I mean, anyone who buys a new printer from now on, they're locked in to that new firmware update. And to some extent, I don't blame Bamboo for doing this. Bamboo, it's not just Bamboo, other 3D printer companies are doing this as well, but we are seeing a shift in the types of 3D printers that are coming out these days. They're not just for tech heads. These are printers that anyone can plug in and use with very little prior knowledge of 3D printing. But for that reason, they've got a lot of people using these printers that don't really understand the nuts and bolts of these things. They don't really get what's going on. And so they're having to kind of limit the amount of control the end user has for their own protection. Because at the end of the day, if you end up giving people too much control, they can go in and change a few settings. And next thing you know, the printer's, sort of the print head's going to crash into the build plate, and you're going to make an absolute mess of things. So it's a very difficult thing, and again, it is happening, I think, from the shift in the way these 3D printers are today compared to how they used to be. But it did end up with a lot of angry people, and if you just jump onto YouTube and do a search for Bamboo, you'll just see all these people posting videos saying, not buying any more Bamboo printers ever again, and even people, who I really appreciate their opinion on these sorts of things, on 3D stuff. I think they're very, people that are very knowledgeable on it, have said that while they understand why Bamboo have done this, they will not be buying any new Bamboo printers. So that sort of says a lot about, Bamboo probably don't care. They're still going to be selling to a lot of people, and they're going to, and the market is expanding, at a great rate at the moment. But that was definitely something that happened with that. So,
it's fun. I mean, unfortunately, I still have one of those printers where you do have to know all the steps and all that shit. But yeah, if that brand came out with an update tomorrow that disabled most of the stuff I need to be successful with that printer, I'd be pissed too, definitely. Especially if you're unable to downgrade. Are you able to downgrade a Bamboo, or? Don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I've none of these printers that I've seen ever seem to have. Look, actually, you might be able to, but no, I don't know. I'm afraid. Now the case can be made, which is oftentimes done. Like, people should have read the release notes before they installed it, which I agree you should do. But if auto update is enabled, you just wake up one day, and like one of the notes I have, I don't know the details, but 2022 Tesla software update. It just happened. People either didn't read or just it automatically installed. I don't know. Less driving range, and what was the other thing? Braking issues. I mean, your car does a software update and you smash into a telephone pole. What the hell?
There's actually a class action that's just been launched against Tesla here in Australia for the two main things. One is the fact that they promised all this auto driving stuff, so you could pay an extra $5,000 and you would get this auto driving stuff when it came out. and it hasn't come out. So these people are saying, I basically paid $5,000 for nothing. But the other is this thing that they refer to as phantom braking. And so it's where the car just starts braking. It thinks there's a security risk or something like that. It thinks there's a problem, not security risk, sorry, like a risk of hitting something.
Yeah.
But it just brakes for no apparent reason. And that's another one that they launched this class action. But one of the things that made me laugh, and again, you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt when it's being put on social media, but there was a woman in her Tesla at a parking lot on a stinking hot day. Now, I don't know if she triggered it by accident or if it happened automatically or something like that, but the car launched into a software update while she was sitting in the car on a stinking hot day in a parking lot in a shopping center. While the update was happening, she was unable to open the doors, open the windows, turn on the air conditioning. She had to sit there and bake in this hot car for 20 minutes until the update had finished.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how true this is. It was a story that turned up in one of my social media things. It could have just been bogus, but I just looked at it and I thought that's taking things a little bit too far.
Yeah. If that's true, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. But we've got a couple of other things here on the list. We've got iOS 801 bricked iPhones in 2014. And yeah, I mean, again, we mentioned that before. It didn't do it to everyone. It just did it to some people.
Yeah.
And Samsung Galaxy Note 7 firmware update in 2016 led to a full recall.
Sounds
that
expensive.
must have been. Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing that I touched on before is the fact that when the Apple Mac OS went from Mojave to Catalina, which is, what is that, 10 point, I don't know. I can't remember the number.
12 to 10.13, I think.
Yeah.
10.12
and when that happened, they dropped that support for 32.
10.14 was Mojave.
Now, when it comes to dropping support for 32-bit applications on the whole, when I went through that transition, I was able to actually get updated versions of pretty much all the software I had. There's one exception. Now, Logitech, they don't anymore, but in the past they made smart remote controls, and they made really good smart remote controls. I mean, to the point that since they stopped making them, no one has filled the gap. There is no one out there making a smart remote control
that is even
close. Yeah, the universal remote. Okay. Sorry, universal is what I should say, not smart remote, but the universal remote. And in my opinion, what Logitech managed to do in terms of making multiple devices all work together. So you might have an amplifier, you got your television set, you got your Apple TV, you got your set-top box or whatever, DVD player. You have all of these different devices there, and these universal remotes just made the process of, using all of these things in harmony. That's what they were called, Harmony Remote. It did an absolutely brilliant job of it. But the reason why I tell this story is Logitech dropped support. They stopped making these remotes, these universal remotes. They just stopped making them altogether. I think probably because it was such a big job setting them up for all the different types of AV hardware that's out there, new TVs happening all the time. And so you used to just look up which TV you had and it would just do it automatically. And I suspect that job just got, insurmountable. But when they did stop making them, they also stopped updating the software to program these remotes. And the last version of the software to program the remotes on the Mac is 32-bit. So my remote still works perfectly, but by updating to Catalina or later, I can no longer run the software to program the remote. And that was that's a really sort of frustrating thing that happens with an update.
Well, that's nothing. I mean, that sounds inconvenient, but that's nothing. I have not been able to play Unreal Tournament 2004 since I moved away from Mojave.
I was going to mention that earlier.
That is bad.
Yes.
And I'm ashamed. I thought I've been playing this game since 1999, And I thought I was diehard enough to just make a dual boot system or set up another computer for it. I haven't played it since. I'm ashamed of myself.
Shame.
Yeah, that's a shame. I have a computer under the desk. I have an iMac under the desk. It's sort of parked up against the wall with an old operating system on it, so I can still run Apple Aperture on it. So because Apple stopped updating Aperture. This is actually another thing, is that, you know, when a company stops updating something and we're actually desperate for a software update, it's like, please, I want an update so that I can run this on the latest system. But Apple decided that they weren't going to support Aperture anymore, just sort of stopped it. And then I guess the idea was that they would sort of add more features to Photos, and so you would use Photos instead of Aperture. But Aperture, I used to love the way it worked, and I have tens of thousands of photos in an Aperture library, and so I just have that library running on a little iMac that I just do share screen, bring it up on the screen of mine, and just have it running on that older operating system. So I could probably run Unreal on that one as well.
Rub it in, why don't you?
Go, you have the tools. You can do it if you want to.
I don't have the space though.
Yeah. iMac, come on. I mean, Mac Mini, little Mac Mini. You come on, they're tiny. Get them anyway. Mind you, they don't have particularly good graphics, do they?
No.
All right, so another thing I'm going to talk about is best practices side of things. So really, when it comes to doing updates, I think one of the things you can do is check with the community, check community reports and feedback when a new update is released. So in other words, let someone else test it. We know that there's always going to be someone out there that's just going to dive right in because they can't help themselves. Let them do it, and then let them tell you what the situation is. We talked about this before with OpenCore, which, of course, OpenCore, an important thing about OpenCore is it's software that you can run on a Mac that will allow you to run operating systems that are where the hardware is not supported by the software anymore. Because as we know, Apple, they're driving you to buy new hardware. So at a certain point, they say, your hardware is too old to run this software, so it can't do it. So this OpenCore legacy patcher software has come out that allows you to install it on there, and then you can put an operating system on there that wouldn't otherwise be supported by Apple. And one of the things with that is they have to do all sorts of fancy jiggery-pokery to make that work. So when updates come out, you kind of have to be a little bit cautious, because for all you know, that update might come in and just completely break something of OpenCore Legacy Patcher. And I know with one of my computers that I have running OpenCore Legacy Patcher, I did an Apple system update, and at the end of that, I lost the WebGL graphics from Safari. So I could no longer, Google Maps is an absolute nightmare, having to sit and wait for it to draw. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that, don't work on Safari, and I still haven't got a fix for that. So I don't know what's going on with that.
Wow.
It's very important, I think, to let someone else take that first step and then just check and see it was okay. And I see this with the 3D printer community all the time. I see people saying, hey, has anyone run this latest firmware update to their 3D printer? Mm-hmm. How is it? That just seems to be the thing going on these community forums, just people checking to make sure that it didn't suddenly break something, that it all went smoothly.
And I will add, that goes for anything that runs any kind of software. You might be one of 20 people in the world that have a smart can opener of a specific brand, specific model. Almost guaranteed there's a Facebook group or a forum for that. Just look it up, and there's always a community of whatever it is that you have. Might not be the biggest, might be in a different language if you're unlucky, but it's there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so use the crowd, use the community to get the information that you need.
Well, that also ties into something you mentioned earlier, was that turn off your auto updates so that you don't automatically get that, and you have time to research and make sure that it's not going to screw up your system.
Yeah.
Or
there's also people like this guy we know. I think his name is Steve Mac84. I don't remember. He turned off auto updates and then just proceeds to never update anything.
Never updates.
I wouldn't advise that either.
He's very resistant to updates. I can tell you that. I was talking to him because we use obviously Final Cut Pro for editing for the YouTubes, and when I'm like, we've got 11.1 now, and he's like, oh yeah, and I'm still on version 6 or something. It's like not that bad, but yeah, Steve is very, very resistant to making updates. I mean, I guess that's probably a sign of him getting burned.
Yeah.
Probably being in a situation where, after an update, something terrible happened. Because I sort of feel like that's the behavior from someone who is worried about what might happen.
Yeah, I would. I get it. I have auto updates off as well. But I will say that if you choose to do that, make it part of your, not necessarily daily, but at the very least weekly routine to check for updates yourself and install whatever's out there.
Yeah.
I do have the notification turned on on Mac OS where it's like, hey, there's an update available. Do you want to install it? And I'll just be like, no. But at least I know it's there,
I mean, for me, the biggest problem with doing an update is the fact that in any given day, I end up launching about like 35 different applications and have all these windows open and stuff like that. And of course, having to do an update means I end up having to restart my computer. I'm like, no, not now. I've got work to do.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, for me, restarting the computer becomes quite a big issue. So that definitely doesn't. It's not conducive to doing updates. But I guess these problems we're talking about, potential problems in updates, leads us to the next thing when it comes to best practices. And this is one that I regularly ignore. Back up before installing updates.
Come on, Bruce.
And of course, they will tell you that. Any time you're doing these updates or upgrades, they'll all say, make sure your computer's backed up before doing this step. And I'm
and it's a CYA, cover your ass type thing where it's like, oh, I lost my family photos from 1947 that I digitized, and they're like, hey, we told you. Sorry.
Yeah. You should have updated.
I will say that I do that every single time. I won't install anything until I have an update, a clone, a cloud backup, and I got my.
Yeah, see, I'm weird because with this, I'm religious about backing it up first. With the computer, I'm like, no, just go ahead and do it. I don't care.
I'm pretty much the same. So, I mean, look, I do have backups of my computer. I use Carbon Copy Cloner that, every night makes a clone of my main drive and my work drive. And so I've got these copies there that I can rely on at any time. But the idea of actually doing a copy just before I do an update, I don't do that. Yes, with the phone, I'm the same. I'm very, very meticulous about backing up the phone, but not so much with the computer. I'm sort of just like, it'll be fine, fine.
And the problem is, most of the time it is, so you get even more complacent about it. Like, last time I backed up 2 months ago.
I did actually get burned by Final Cut Pro. So when Final Cut Pro did an update at one stage, there's a filter that I use called it's called Voice Enhancer or something like that, and it combines 3 different filters. It combines like a compressor and different stuff to try and improve the sound of the voice. And you have all these little settings you can change. And when they did an update, not only had that filter disappeared, but anything you had that used that filter, all the audio is now silent. So if I opened up an old project, all of just the audio was silent. You could remove the filter and then the sound would come back, but of course it wasn't the same as I had it. I had it with all these filters applied to it. Apple fixed that problem so that the audio is there, but and you can still copy and paste that filter from an old to a new. But if I remember rightly, that filter that I use is not actually in the range that you can choose from. So, I mean, they might have brought it back now, but what I was having to do is anytime I wanted to use that filter, I literally had to copy it from another project and then paste it into the new project. And because they did bring in a replacement, but the replacement had nowhere near as many controls. So that was one time where I really got burned, and that did make me quite hesitant to update Final Cut Pro, because that was a big one. You know, if you're partway through a project, nearly finished it and just about ready to export it, and then there's no sound, you know, I mean, what a pain in the backside.
I'm sorry. Who updates their software in the middle of a project, Bruce?
Who does that without a backup? Yeah, I know. I didn't even back it up.
But that's a very good example, Final Cut Pro, where the improvements and bug fixes are so important that even if you get hit with a bug or something like that, it's like, what do I do? You know, I can downgrade, but then these bugs come back, or I can do it. In the case of Final Cut Pro, it's very tricky because they usually have some really good bug fixes in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, one of the recent additions to Final Cut Pro is tracking, which they added, which allows you to, like, let's say I put my hand up here and I could sort of move my hand around and have something moving with my hand. I could have an emoji or something on the tip of my finger and I can move this around.
You know you're going to have to edit that in now, right?
Yeah, I know. If it's not there, you'll know something went drastically wrong.
Right.
It needs to be the barfing emoji.
Yes, okay, the barfing emoji, no worries. So that was a really, really important feature, because that's sort of it allows you to do so much when you can actually track something onto sort of something that's moving in the video without having to do a whole bunch of little keyframes and stuff like that. And that so that was very, very appealing. That was something that would drive me to say, I want this latest update because I want to be able to use that functionality. So that was definitely an example where a feature it sort of made me go in and do that update. Okay, so we've got another little best practices here. Test updates on other older systems first, if possible. No, never done it. Have never done that.
I do. This my primary computer is always last. I mean, that laptop will get it. That laptop will get it. Mac Minis will get it. My wife will get it. My kid will get it. But this one is typically a week behind.
I think I probably did have a sort of similar thing, but I had that when I was using an old Mac Pro, which of course was already well past its kind of, life. The Mac Pro was a 2012 model, and I was running software on it that was never supposed to run in the first place. That one, I definitely used to try things on other computers first, because that was number one, it was the main computer I used, but the other, it was, things were just layer on top of each other, and it worked, and you just didn't want to touch it, didn't want to mess with it. It's like
it's a house of cards, definitely.
yes, absolutely.
And for everybody watching that doesn't know, he makes it sound like this was a computer from the 80s. No, it is still a very acceptable computer to use today. Some people just abandoned it and walked away from it in favor of newer, shinier hardware.
That's right. I walked away from all those slow render times.
I walked away from YouTube. It doesn't bother me.
So yeah,
mine's right there, so I'm all right.
Yeah. Well, mine's right here. It's still being used, but it's just not being used for this. But yeah, so I as I said, I initially said I didn't test on older systems, but I did. I remember, I used to do that before. And of course, this is another one of these best practices. We've touched on this before already, and that is read the release notes. That's a very important thing to make sure. Now, question. Let's say you read the release notes and you look at that and you think there's nothing there that really applies to my situation. They're fixing a thing that allows it to work with a thing I don't have, or whatever the case may be. Do you look at the release notes and then say, well, seeing as this doesn't affect me, I'm not even going to bother doing this update? Or would you just do it anyway to make sure you got the latest?
It has happened. Not in case of the Mac, because every update comes with security patches as well. But I've done it for some switches and routers. Okay, I don't use Radius, I don't use any of this stuff, and there's no specific security fixes. Why bother? So I'll skip an update or two until they introduce patches for security or stuff like that, or a feature I want.
So I guess that's it from the best practices side of things. So, I mean, I think really when we think about system, or software updates in general, I guess the main goal is security is probably the primary thing. And, when you're considering whether you're going to do a system update or not, making sure that your computer is, secure. You want to make sure that, I guess, you're probably running the software that works best, with your hardware, I suppose. I mean, when we're talking about things like making sure you're updating to software that runs on, Apple Silicon architecture versus working on sort of an old Intel architecture.
Well, I mean, there have been some specific security updates. This was, I think, even the M1 or M2 had a few where the CPU specifically required microcode changes because of a vulnerability. And that I've never noticed in using the computer, but when you benchmark the computer, definitely took a hit on performance after the security patch was applied. So, yeah, do you want a little bit more performance but a vulnerable system, or do you want a safe system but you took a hit on performance? I guess that's up to everyone individually to decide. I chose for security and installed it.
I mean, I guess this is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for maximum security, maximum stability. So, I mean, if we talk about things that are going to provide bug fixes, that's going to mean that your computer or the software is going to be more stable, and we definitely want to go with that. And again, and features, I guess, well, that comes down to the individual, doesn't it? I mean, there might be some features that will really benefit you. I've seen certain features come along that have been absolutely fantastic and have definitely benefited me and have made me more productive. And so for that, then I'd say, yes, I definitely want the update so I can take advantage of those features. But then other times I might look at it and think, I'm never going to use that. I mean, some of the fitness stuff that they bring in, it's like, look at me.
Yeah, I would love some of the new features in the latest macOS Sequoia, but all of the stuff I want only runs on an M whatever Mac, not on my Intel. So yeah, why bother updating if I can't use any of the stuff I want to use?
Yeah, fair enough. Give us an example of something you want from Sequoia.
Well, I want to get back into writing, and I would love the AI to spell, or not spell, but kind of look at what I'm writing and make it more legible and readable and stuff like that.
So you want to cheat?
No.
I haven't tried any of that yet. I should.
I am long-winded as hell when I write. So if I can click a button that says summarize, perfect. Do it.
And the AI says, you should have just said turn it off and turn it on again.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I think we're probably getting to the stage where we've talked enough about this subject. So I guess I would invite anyone who is watching to please leave any comments that you might have about updates, what you do with updates, your practice, whether you update straight away or whether you wait for someone else. Whether you
I want horror stories. I want
that's right.
Yeah,
that's what we're really after. We want
worse
horror
the better.
stories where you've done an update and something has gone disastrously wrong.
If your computer caught fire after an update, we want to hear about it.
We want to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we're probably, I mean, do you guys have anything else you would like to add before I wrap things up?
No.
Okay. All righty.
It's good to be back.
Yes, it is good to be back. Do expect to see us, hopefully more frequently than we were before. We're at episode 10, which is a pretty amazing accomplishment. Who would have thought we'd end up with 10 episodes? But we've already got plans for our next few episodes, so hopefully we'll be back with you fairly soon, and we can start building those subscriber numbers, eh? Yeah.
Right? Got 5 now, I think.
Yep. Tell your friends how amazingly interesting we are. They don't have to know the truth.
Oh, it is the truth. Damn.
So anyhow, thank you to anyone who is watching. Thank you for watching. Thanks for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the little conversation we had, the little tech chat that we had. Thank you to you, Jay, thank you to you, Dana, for being part of this again. And my voice is just gradually getting higher and higher.
I know.
Doing the Stewie thing.
And I hope to see you in the future. And so thank you to everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you with the next one. So bye-bye.
Ciao.
Get a wave.